Hello and welcome. My name is Steve Gibson and I'm from the Pursue Network. The Pursue Network is a charity based in Devon and Cornwall, and we resource and train worship teams across the region. But if you're watching this from outside of the Southwest, don't worry, you're also very, very welcome here. We're really lucky today. We are joined by an amazing drummer who I've worked with a couple of times in Cornwall called Jon Greene. Jon, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very much enjoying the weather today.
Is it sunny
The,
where you
the
are?
mid the middle of the July heat wave, all 2 days of it,
Fantastic.
and I'm loving it.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. So, where are you based?
I'm based in Birmingham.
Fantastic. How long have you been there?
Just coming up to 6 years. So I moved to Birmingham for university. So I grew up in a place called Winchester. I moved to Birmingham, about 6 years ago, and I love it.
Fantastic. And which church do you go to in Birmingham?
So I go to a church called Gas Street Church. So it's right in the city centre. It's quite a big church. We've got four locations now. Um, Quite a young congregation, lots of students and kind of young adults. So it's great.
But how did you get involved in drumming at Gas Street?
So I moved to Birmingham to do a music degree. So I'd grown up playing drums in church. Knew that, when I got to Birmingham, when I was at Gas Street, I was like, well, I want to get involved on drums, and um, so just kind of did the sort of team application process, and ended up doing an audition and getting invited on team. Um, yeah,
And you haven't looked back since?
I haven't looked back since. No, I've loved it, and it's been awesome. And I've kind of since in the past couple of years um, started doing a lot more production stuff as well. So I found that whilst I love drumming and it is like my go-to thing, actually I was kind of getting a little bit bored's the wrong word, but I was kind of want a new challenge, and I've always loved sort of the production side, mixing, and so started getting involved in that, and was quite fortunate. We had a period where the guy who was running our production had left. We didn't have a massive team, so it was kind of a case of like, well, you're not ready to do it on your own, but also if you don't do it, there's no one to do it. So got chucked in at the deep end and kind of learnt a lot and loved it. So now I'm kind of probably 50-50. I do mix front of house and I live stream, and then drum kind of around that.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm aware that your picture at my end is a bit fuzzy, but there's nothing we can do about that, so we'll keep going with it and see what happens. It's all good fun. So actually what I love about that is you're not just a drummer. You're more than a drummer. I think often you get people in church who become just the drummer, but you've actually looked beyond that and thought, where's God calling you? And actually you've been called into production as well, which is great. So you actually have a
Mm,
better understanding of a holistic picture, which is good to know.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the song you've enjoyed drumming on the most?
Oh, good question. My favourite song to drum to would be. I'll tell you what. I've recently been getting maybe slightly bored of the song "Praise" by Elevation, and I think it's because there was like a period of 2 months where every Instagram reel from like any church or any charity or whatever were using that song, and so I think I got to a point where I was like, I'm sick of this, but I'd never played it in church. And then like over the past few weeks, it's just every time I've played at a couple of different events, that's been on the set list, and I've loved it. Such a fun song to play. Um, yeah,
I think it is one of those songs, isn't it, where you can, when you're doing it and when you're playing it and when you're in the moment, you can really go for it. When you're
yeah.
hearing it on a YouTube clip or when you're hearing it on TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever you might be listening on, it's like, yep, I've heard that bit again, but I'm not there.
Mm. And I think it's like any song that you just end up hearing over and over again. It's like actually it's a great song, and I think it was like just a case of hearing it too much.
And now you love it anyway. So yeah,
And now I love it. So
yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Swings and roundabouts in that one. Brilliant, brilliant. So obviously you've worked with lots of different worship leaders at Gas Street and across the country as well, doing various festivals and things. When you work with different people, what's it like? What's the lessons you've learned from that experience of working with so many different people?
Um, yeah, I think I think one of the most important things, especially as a drummer, and this would apply probably to all backline musicians, is figuring out what that different worship leader's method of communication is. So the church I grew up in, and this actually seems to be the case with a lot of worship leaders, like to signal that they want something quiet, to sort of to calm down and be quieter, they might lift their guitar up, or like they might stamp their foot. However, I worked with a worship leader a couple of months ago who their signals were, I can't remember exactly, but it was like opposite to that basically. So I kept backing out when I thought they wanted that, but actually they were like, I think they were like, they would bring it down by lifting the guitar lower and bring it up by lifting the guitar higher. So they're like, what are you doing? I want. So I think establishing, actually just going, hey, like, I've not played with you before. What are your signals? Because actually, no matter what happens, actually, if you know, they can just signal to you in the moment. And if you're able to follow that, not only are they going to feel so much more supported, but they're also they don't have to think about turning around and telling the band. I always think, as a worship leader, I think you want to know that your band is just there. Like, they're just there as like a constant thing. And you want basically your band to be pushing out energy that you can use to lead from. And actually, if the energy is always there, it's really easy for you to just be like, okay, let's bring it down. So if there's like, you've got to the end of a chorus, for example, and it's that moment where it's like, oh, we could go around again big, or we might go down. Actually, if you're playing in a way that is really easy for them to just go again, they've got that energy, but it's so easy for them to just be like, nah, not now. And it's much easier to turn around and go, chill out, guys, no, than to turn around and be like, come on, like, give me something. And so I think that is something I definitely say across all backline, is like, err on the side of like giving that energy. Mm-hmm. Obviously not outrageous energy, but actually it's so much better to have it there and then be told to just tone it down a bit than have the worship leader literally feel like they're fighting to try and get like a noise out of the band.
You've just echoed the exact wording of my driving instructor 20 odd years ago, who said it's easier to get a driver to slow down than it is to get them to speed up. So
yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like, if you, from a worship leader's point of view, like they're so focused on what's happening in the room, like spiritually, what's happening. Is this song resonating? Like, do we need to push into that moment more? Actually, is this not really working? And like, do we need to maybe go somewhere else? Like, what's God saying? Like, they don't need to be having to worry about what the band's doing as well. The second as well that they have to turn around, like, they've lost their eyes of the room. I don't know, like, as a worship leader yourself, I don't know if you'd agree with that or what you'd say about that.
It's always good to know that they've got my back. Knowing that they are there, that if I need something from them, they are already there, ready, and they're prepared, I think is a key thing for me as a worship leader. Just knowing that band is ready to go is exciting, because I'll be honest, the number of times I've led worship and not followed the plan, I think is uncountable at this stage.
Yeah.
And so they know that they can follow me, I can follow them, we can bounce off each other. So yeah, that communication is really key in that.
Yeah. I think on that as well, I think it's really important to hold. So I think planning and preparation is so important, but holding that lightly, because actually, like you say, it might be that, if we're leading at an event together, you might have sent me a 10-song set list. Great, I've learnt it all. But actually, we might get there and those songs just are not what the moment needs and are not where people in the congregation are at. And actually, I've had it before, to be honest, where I'll be like, well, I spent like 2 hours preparing and you've just... but it's like, actually, the preparation is prepared my heart maybe, and the fact I've prepared is important, but actually we have to be flexible. We have to be accommodating of what the Lord is doing in the room and where the worship leader thinks, what direction they want to take it in. So I guess preparation is important, but also holding it lightly, and when you actually get to the service or gathering or event, whatever it is you're doing.
The analogy I often use is diving board. We are building, as we prepare, we are building a solid diving board. If we climb up a diving board and it's shaky, we're not really going to be brave enough to jump off properly and do a decent dive. We're going to sort of stand on the edge maybe or retreat a little bit. But when we've got a solid diving board, this is talking from someone who hates swimming. So not a perfect analogy for me, but you get the idea. If it's a really well built diving board, you jump off with confidence. And I'm sure Tom Daly, Southwest hero, would agree with that. Awesome. So what is the you said backline earlier on. Just for the people who might not know what a backline is, can you just let us know what that word means?
Yeah, of course. So backline, so in a band you'd have what would be referred to as your front line and your back line. So your front line is going to be your worship leader or worship leaders, which is like a bad term because technically everyone in the band is a worship leader. We're all leading the congregation of worship, but the people who are singing basically would be your front line, and then your back line is going to be your instrumentalists. So would typically be your drummer, bassist, keys player, guitarist, but anything else, any other instruments you have would be your back line.
Brilliant. I always love the fact this terminology exists. But sometimes we use it and don't know quite what it means, or we start to learn how to use it. But it is really helpful to know how to describe things on stage sometimes when you are leading worship. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just to clarify, I think I talked earlier, like front of house engineer, broadcast engineer. So front of house engineer is your main sound engineer. So they're the one mixing the sound in the room, who arguably they're the most important person because they're the one who is actually making what happens at the front or on the stage or whatever your context is, making that audible. And then a broadcast engineer would be like, if you've got a live stream, maybe if you've got a person running that mix, that would be that person. So yeah, lots of different words, terms and stuff.
So I'm going to have to ask you a question now, which is for both your perspectives as a front of house engineer mixing the sound and as a drummer. So we've not really focused too much on the drums just yet. We'll focus down on that in a moment. But as a front of house engineer and as a drummer, what would you want from yourself when you're setting up sound, when you're preparing? What sort of helpful things can you do to help communication and preparation there?
As in terms of like, as a sound engineer, what do I want?
Yes.
Do you mean? Or yeah. I think communication is so important. I think as well, I sometimes, like if I'm mixing a different band or a guest band, I'll literally have my laptop and I'll write keys player, Steve, drummer, because like it means that then you can just address them by name, and rather than having to be like guitar, it's just awkward otherwise. So I think learning names. I think like sound check wise, you just want everyone to turn up, plug in, and just do that as efficiently as possible. There's nothing and it's that funny balance of like, yes, like we're in church and we're community, and you might not have seen the person all week, and you want to have a catch up, but also sound check is not the time for that. Like, it's at risk of sounding harsh, but like it just wastes everyone's time. And actually, like getting through the sound check, just plugging in, being efficient. Like, yeah, I'm good to go. Boom, boom. Yeah, great. Next instrument, just moving through that as swiftly as possible. And I think if the band is all kind of on board with that, you go into a rehearsal knowing your setup, knowing stuff works, knowing that you've got more time to practice or to fix things. And with any luck, you can finish rehearsal a bit early and, have an even longer catch up after.
And what's your message specifically to drummers when they're doing sound checks?
So if your sound engineer is asking you for, like, give me the kick drum, just give them the kick drum. Like, nice, consistent, not too fast. The most important thing in sound check, or one of the most important things, and this goes across the board, is try and play at the volume that you're going to play in the service or the event or whatever it is, because as a sound engineer, we set what we call gains, and it's like the level. And if you're playing your kick drum, I'm going to set these levels according to what you play. if it gets into the main thing and you play like twice as hard, which happens regularly, it just messes your whole mix, like, is ripped apart, and you basically, it would just sound terrible, like it will sound distorted and all these things. And so I think just trying to be as consistent and treating soundcheck like as realistic to your actual service, just makes everyone's life easier. Also, if you're in a context where you're on in-ears as well, again, if you suddenly play way louder in the actual thing, you're going to blow everyone's ears out. And at that point, everyone's scrabbling around trying to change it, and yeah.
Oh, I've been in those situations before. Always good fun when your ears suddenly, and I've got one ear that doesn't work very well, so when I've got all the sound in the wrong ear in the wrong place, I end up trying to take one out to try and save this ear's hearing and all sorts. It's a fun moment during the service when it starts. Yeah, all part of the fun. So let's focus a bit more on drumming, and let's zoom in on the creative process. Let's say you've got a new song that you've been asked to lead as a drummer. How do you approach that? What do you do?
I think it's so important to know the song well. So you want to come into the rehearsal knowing the structure of the song. So for me, I would do that by like just listening to the song as much as I can throughout the week. And this is specific for me, like I quite often like trying to learn the chords of the song. So I might listen to it and try and learn like the bass line or the guitar chords, just because for me that's how I find I learn it. If I learn it on a different instrument, I almost feel like I learn it more thoroughly, but often there won't be time for that or whatever. But yeah, I'll listen to it as much as possible, try and learn as close as possible what the drum parts are. So learn what is the kick pattern in the chorus, what is the snare drum pattern, where does it move from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal, all those things, because whilst then when it comes to it, I might play it slightly differently to that. Ultimately, like with a song, people have got together and hopefully have prayerfully crafted that arrangement and those parts serve the song really well. And especially with a new song where everyone's new to it, if you've got a band of like 5 people, say drums, bass, guitar, keys as your backline, if everyone just comes having learnt the original parts or as close to as possible, everything's just going to lock in straight away. And it's at that point then you can start to experiment and change things. If everyone comes in having created their own parts to it, having not heard each other's parts, I guarantee it will just be messy. And you'll have different parts clashing and yeah. So I think learning the song as well as possible, learning the drum grooves for it, trying to then, especially as a drummer, like you want to lock in with your bassist. So you want to actually, if you've learned the kick patterns of the song and the bassist has learned roughly the bass part of the song, you two are going to be locked in. And obviously that's all the low end. If the low end is in the mix is good, then that's a good starting point.
Brilliant. I do think that. I think it's really dangerous sometimes. People often think, I don't want to listen to the song too much, we'll do it our own way. But actually by listening to the song, you learn how the song works, you learn different skills, you learn different rhythms, and you expand your own repertoire. Yes, you can put your own twist on a song later on as you start to bounce off each other and bring your own timbre, I think is the musical word for it, but your own sound to the song. But certainly at the start, to actually spend time, totally agree with you, spend time learning that song, going into it, learning it properly is great fun. Yeah.
A mate of mine, a guy called Dan, he's a great bassist and producer. He was like, well, we learn the parts so that when we get to the rehearsal, we can have fun with it. It's like, actually, if we come in, we know the basics, we know that, do you know what, we've got it and it will work, but it's then that you can start to have fun with it. It's then that you can start to embellish the guitar line, or that, you can think, oh, I'm going to put that extra fill in on the drums, or all that stuff.
I know there was the actor who played Bilbo Baggins in the first Lord of the Rings series. I've forgotten his name, but he was really well known for memorising all his lines really early on in the process. And then every single take, giving the director something completely different. never recording it the
Yeah.
same way, because he could just bounce off things. He could work out, well, you responded to that, I'm going to bounce off you differently. And once you start that process, once you've learnt the foundations, I guess it's the same process for music. Once you've learnt those foundations, you can start to work out where the song's going to take you next as a team.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Brilliant. So how, just out of interest, how do you avoid a song becoming a Spotify performance? What do you do to sort of keep that song fresh and avoid just doing it from start to finish, same way, same every time?
Yeah, I think it's important to think creatively. Um, and it's doing that in a way that isn't too outrageous. A really good example of this is we've got a song at Gas Street, which was written by a couple of our guys called Thanksgiving, um, which is it's a great song. It's a real like just praise, good vibes. Like if you've got a sleepy congregation, starting your set with that, like everyone's jumping by the end, and but not in like a uncomfortable like hype jumpy way. Like it's and but we play it so much, and and the reason we play it so much is because the room always like it unlocks something. Um, but we use so in our church we play everything to click. So we have like a metronome in our ears, which is great. It just helps you. Basically means you don't have to focus on timekeeping. You can really focus on creativity and all that. But what we also do is some of our songs will play to tracks. So tracks is basically when you'll have some audio recordings of additional instruments. So the mix is very much still focused on the instruments on stage. The tracks we use to just slightly embellish it. So Thanksgiving is a song that we use track to. So one of the downsides of that is you're much more like fixed in your arrangements. So something I've been trying to do is actually just be a bit more creative with the drum part, trying to vary it a little bit from time to time. So that might even be that I just change a lot of it's tom based. So it might be I change the tom pattern a little bit, or it might be that there's a bit in the chorus where it does like a nice walk down. In with the chords, so actually, like we started adding just hits on that, like bam, 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 just little things like that that freshen it up. And then we're actually looking for Wildfires this year. We're looking to maybe like rearrange it a bit. So I think we're going to do it a little bit faster, change up the drum grooves a bit more, just to keep it fresh. Yeah.
Brilliant. I think again, freshness is always good in worship. Things can get stale so quickly, and we don't come to church to experience Spotify. We can do that at home. We come to church to have a live, living encounter with God, and that means sometimes going on different directions and seeing what happens. So I love actually, even when you're using tracks, you've got that ability just to push it a little bit further, to try and be creative each time, just to think what will work. I know I encourage teams to do the same before the rehearsals, or when we're rehearsing before a service. Often we'll mess around a little bit with something, but then in those moments we'll say, right, the service has come now. Let's focus down on what worked and what didn't work, and we take a few less risks in the service itself. But it's just an opportunity to try and see what works.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say a great example is a song called King of Kings, which I want to say is Hillsong.
Yeah,
is it Hillsong? Yeah, Hillsong. Really like. Well-known riff at the start. Like the first thing you hear is boom, 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 and like we started sometimes doing an alternate arrangement of it. So we took Upper Room's arrangement of it, which is much more relaxed. It doesn't get big until the end, whereas the original Hillsong one is like there's a lot more drums and stuff throughout it. And again, it's just like a different flavour to the song, and it means the song starts and you don't go, oh, there's that riff, oh, we're singing King of Kings again. Like, and it keeps it fresh, and it's like, oh, this is cool musically. And obviously, yes, we're praising the Lord. We're not trying to like worship the musicality of it, but also, I think trying to glorify God through our music, keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, using. And like this one, we've literally just pinched someone else's arrangement, but like using your own arrangement of it, you know, and using that creativity is awesome. And I think then the room, it's like often people in the congregation just yeah, it's just a different approach to the song, isn't it? And I think that can be really exciting.
So here's a question for you. Obviously, Pursue Network focuses mainly in the southwest, and we've got everything from big churches with hundreds of people and flashing lights and haze to small communities that meet in a shed in the middle of a farm in the middle of nowhere with just a few people gathering to worship God. And there's a real sense of rawness in some of those locations, but also the range of songs being sung is immense. One minute you've got something from the most modern releases, next minute you're singing hymns from the 1600s and hoping that everyone knows the words still and can understand them. Hymns and older songs have been sung for many, many years, and every now and again they pop up as fresh versions of them are released. How do you, as a drummer, approach a song that's so old and add something fresh to it? Challenging question for you
It's a
now.
good question. It's a really good question. Uh, I think I think this is one where what do I want to say? So I think when you're taking like maybe like like an old hymn, I'm going to start that again. So I think when you're taking, I think when you're taking an old hymn, or something like that, changing an arrangement, I think it's really important. And to be honest, this goes for any song. Like if someone's written a song in your church on their guitar and you're wanting to put it into a whole band, this applies as well. Having someone take the lead on the musicianship of it. So we often at our church have what we would call an MD, so musical director, which is basically you've got your main worship leader who's leading the songs. It will just be someone, it's normally the keys player or the bass player. They have a microphone, they can just talk to the band. And it's so good because they can just be like, okay, we'll bring it down here, let's build it up. And it's kind of as simple as that. And it just helps keep everyone together. But having someone like that who's going to maybe take overall responsibility for the arrangement, because I've been in rehearsals where we've had a new song. Everyone comes with their ideas, which is awesome, don't get me wrong, but then there's been no one to sort of have the final say in terms of stewarding how we do that. And then you listen back to the recording and it's just this colossal like mishmash of musical ideas and it's messy and it doesn't work. I remember, so one of my mates at primary school, his dad was an architect, and I said to him, I was like, oh, like, what? I think I said, what's one of the challenges of being an architect? And he said, knowing that I can't use all my ideas that I have for every house design. So it's like if he took every single design idea for each house, the houses would just look ridiculous and they wouldn't be functional. And I think it's the same with music. It's you need that person who ultimately is going to go, do you know what? I really like that part you're doing on the guitar, but I don't think that works with the rest of the band. Or someone who goes, I love that drum groove, let's simplify it a bit. So I think nominating someone who's going to like have that responsibility, and that might be your worship leader. And then I think as a musician coming in with ideas, but again, not taking offense if your idea doesn't make the cut. It's probably not that it's a bad idea. It's just probably not the right idea for that setting. And that's okay. Like there's literally nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Totally, yes. I think I will be simplifying my reggae, country, Taylor Swift mishmash of Be Thou My Vision and sticking to maybe just the Celtic version for that one then. Yeah.
But I think also, can I say, I think as well though, like if you're a worship leader and you're like, I want to do this random hymn. So again, if you're a worship leader and you want to do this hymn, try and have an idea of what you want to do with it. So don't just come into rehearsal and be like, yeah, we're going to do this song. Let's just figure it out and work it out. If you've got 3 hours, great. If you haven't got that luxury of time and you've got to do it in 15 minutes, you need to come with more than that. Actually, if you can say, I want to do this hymn, but I want to do it kind of in the style of um, praise by elevation worship, but actually I want to use like the verse groove from All Hail King Jesus, for example. That way your band in their preparation can listen to those two songs and they can be like, okay, I've learnt that groove, I've learnt that, cool. Not quite sure how that's going to link together, but I'll try that. But do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
your band can come in knowing what you want, and then there's more of a brief. I think that's really important. Coming in with like having an idea of where you want to get to and communicating that to people in advance.
What I love about lots of our conversations so far is it's been really focused on the preparation before the service even happens. It's
Yeah.
the communication from the worship leader and the worship team before things begin, so that everyone turns up to rehearsal with different ideas that they can bounce off each other, they can build and develop and create. I think that's really good that you know that your team, and I know people are busy when they're working full-time jobs and they're doing this on the side as well, but listening to a track in the car is definitely a doable thing these days. It's not like you've got to make a cassette tape and put it in the machine and rewind it to the end and everything else. It's the technology has moved on significantly since the early 90s. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, just to say on that, coming back to when we talked about learning new songs earlier, like, if I'm learning a new song, I'm not intentionally sitting down to listen to it like 20 times in the week. I will just put it on 3 times on repeat in the car, or I'll just and it's just having that stuff around you in the background. That's how you learn it. If you sit down, you're like, I'm going to learn it note for note, listen to it twice. You won't. Like, no one can do that. Some people probably can, but majority of people definitely can't. But it's having it, all around. And I think the thing for worship is like, if you're able to get your set list up on Tuesday, sweet.
Yeah.
It's when you get a set list on Saturday night and it's like, well, I don't have time to prepare. So it would just be what it will be, and that will probably be messy.
Yeah. And that's not just a message for worship leaders, that's a message for worship pastors or pastors of church as well, ministers and vicars. Having that plan beforehand gives the bands time to play with it, to prepare for it, to dig into it. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talking about digging in, just on a side note, how do you ensure that your service on a Sunday isn't out of routine, but is actually a devotion to God, and honouring God as you turn up?
Yeah, that's, I think, such an important point. And if I'm honest, that is a rut that I've got stuck in several times over the past few years. Because I think you can, especially if you're maybe in a smaller church context where there's fewer volunteers, or like even in a bigger church context, but there's just not many people on team. Like for us, like I did like mixed our live stream sort of like every Sunday for about 3 months. Kind of just because we don't really have many people who do that, and I had the time in the week to be able to do that. And what started out as me being like, sweet, I can really serve and help out at church and all of that and worship through that, it did become, by the end, it was like, okay, right, here we go again, Sunday morning, okay, like let's turn the computer, and it does, it just becomes too routine sometimes. And I honestly think the most important thing is like serving on Sundays in a healthy amount, even if, like, unless you're the paid worship pastor at your church and so you're contractually obliged to be there, no matter how big or small your church is, you do not have to be there every Sunday. And your mental and spiritual well-being is so much more important, even if like the band's going to be a bit small. And like, genuinely never let anyone tell you otherwise, because I've been made to feel like that sometimes, and it's just wrong. And then because actually, if you can sometimes take a Sunday off where actually you just attend church, or even if it's a case of you're like, I've been in church too much recently and I actually need to have a Sunday where I don't come to church, and actually maybe I go out for a prayer walk instead, and actually I'm going to do my community somewhere else in the week. Like, if that's going to help your relationship with God and help the place that you serve from, then do it. So I've now got to a point, and I'm starting a new job in September as a teacher, so my schedule's going to look a bit different anyway. But I've like intentionally been going, okay, well, actually, I'm doing 2 weeks. The third week, no, like I need to just come and be able to sit at the back. I think as well, yes, you worship God through doing your ministry and serving, and you encounter God through doing that, and you can receive from God through doing that, but ultimately you're there to lead people. You need to be in a space where you can be led. Like, you need to regularly be in a space where you can jump and praise, or lie on the floor of the back and cry. Like, whatever it is, like, you need to be in that space where you can be led sometimes. And that's a mistake I've definitely made before, is not allowing for that to happen. Yeah.
That's really, really good wisdom there. That's really good. I think there's an obligation sometimes that we feel that we ought to be doing certain things and behaving a certain way, but actually in all things our only obligation is to God.
Yeah.
And there's two churches that we're currently working with as Pursue Network, both of which have very small teams who get worn out doing a morning service and an evening service every single week without fail. So 1 week of the month, we pop down and we lead worship for them and give them some time out. And it just means that they get a chance to soak. Sometimes they don't even turn up that Sunday. Sometimes they turn up and say, we love it when you're here. Sometimes they say, we love it when you're here because we're not. It's just a great chance to breathe and make sure that we're not in that routine. So yeah, I love that. Some great words there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, coming to the close. I hate not going to say the phrase because my dad worked in the airplane industry, so I'm going to avoid the analogy that people often use. But we are coming to Land's End. I'll say that instead, and I'll cycle down in the southwest. That was awful. I'll move on quickly. Is there anything like with, say, a set of 3-letter acronyms or anything like that you can think of that would be good advice for drummers, just to summarise what you've been saying during our session?
Yeah, definitely. I think
the classic 3-letter acronym.
Yeah, I have three words that I come to. And obviously I'm going to talk specific drum examples, but actually these three go for any instrument. They are simplicity, consistency, and heart. So I'll rattle through them, but simplicity, like, don't play needlessly complicated things. It distracts people from their worship to God, and it distracts the other band. And actually the most important thing is picking a kick and snare pattern for your chorus and sticking to that pattern throughout the chorus. Picking your bridge pattern and sticking to that. Thinking about the journey of the song. How can you just help that? How can you, go with the ebb and flows of the dynamics? And are there certain words? Like, are there certain lines? If there's a line in the verse about, and then Jesus rose again, like, great, like, let's give it some more, So that's the first, I think, simplicity. Second one would be consistency. So that is in terms of being consistent with the volume that you're playing, how you're hitting the drums, where you're hitting the drums. So obviously in a song, we're not going to be at the same volume the whole way. Like, we're going to be going up and down. But actually in a verse or a chorus or whatever it is, you want to, let's say we're in the chorus, you want to hit your snare drum the same volume every time in that section of the song. You want to try and hit in the same place on the drum, because different parts of the drum head have different sounds. Like, if you're near the edge, it's ringier. You could play the simplest groove in the world, and if you play it with the same, like, velocity, so how hard the bass and snare drum are throughout it, hit in the same place, it will sound amazing. You could play the same groove, dynamics all over the show, hitting all, and it will sound messy. And I think those things are so important in any church context. Like, if you're on a massive stage with a PA, drum booth, that's so important. If you're in a tiny little church hall and there's 15 people in the room, it's almost more important, because actually, if you're playing quietly and then you suddenly like smack the snare, everyone's going to get deafened. So simplicity, consistency, and then finally heart. Like, is there conviction in your playing? Do you believe that actually what you're bringing every time you're hitting that snare drum, that something spiritual is happening, that enemy strongholds are being shaken? Like, because we look in the Bible and we see through it music being at the forefront of, like, when, you know, God moves or God would lead people somewhere or that sort of things. Like, do we believe spiritually that what we're doing musically is having an impact? And then I guess the final phrase I'd say, I know you said three things, but I'm going to say four. A friend of mine, a guy called Luke, he has this phrase that he used. He was like, with drumming, you want to be where passion meets precision. So you want to bring all your passion and your worship and all of that, but we want to be precise as well. Like, we want to be going for consistency. We want to be going for that simplicity. And also, simplicity doesn't mean boring. Like, simplicity just means doing something that serves the song well. So sitting in that place of, like, bringing all that excitement, that energy, but doing it in a way that's calculated and controlled, and isn't just going, like, all over the drums, ridiculously crazy, but isn't just, like, the most boring, like, rigid groove. And I think when you find that place, it's really exciting, like, what can happen musically. And that goes for any instrument, but I think especially on the drums.
I love the irony that the drummer, the loudest instrument possibly in the entire band, has an acronym which basically spells shh.
Amazing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing this wisdom. That's been absolutely incredible. It's been a pleasure to have you chat with us. Where can we find you next? Are you at any festivals this summer?
You can find me at Wildfires with Gastronomic Music, end of August. Hopefully see some of you there.
Fantastic. We'll see you around at the festivals, and good luck as you start your teaching career. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll catch you again soon. To all those people listening at home, it's been Jon Greene. He's currently the drummer, one of the drummers at Grass Street Church, filling us with wisdom and incredible information and insight into drumming. If you are a drummer, or if you are a musician or worship leader, you are very welcome to join in with the Pursue Network, to engage with us in some way. We're a charity based in the Southwest, and we just want to bless the region and serve God wherever He calls us. For now, God bless.